Coming up on Network Africa, France warns Mali against entering a deal with Russian mercenary deal Wagner Group. Africa CDC says less than 3.5% of Africans are vaccinated against COVID-19 as Zimbabwe bars the unvaccinated from work and Ethiopia records highest virus deaths in 2 days. Plus, outrage in Kenya over a sharp rise in the price of fuel. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin the program with a story on the security situation across the continent, especially in regions battling Islamic insurgency. Well, the French Defense Ministry has put out a warning to Mali against entering into a deal with a Russian security firm. The minister, Florence Parly, describes the potential deal as extremely worrying, saying it would undermine efforts by France to counter the jihadist threat in the region. There have been reports that Mali's military rulers are close to hiring mercenaries from the Wagner Group. Now, this is a group believed to be operating in several African countries as Russia seeks to increase its influence. Its employees are fighting rebels in the Central African Republic, where Russian companies have secured mining concessions. For more discussions on this, we're now being joined by David Otto, a security analyst. Thank you so much for speaking to us on the program.
Thank you.
Now, what do you think of this warning from France? Should France be making such a threat to a sovereign nation? Doesn't it reek of the hold France has over Francophone West Africa?
Yes, of course. I mean, France is highly threatened by other countries getting involved in the security systems within Africa. But what we have to make very clear here, Layo, is that the so-called Wagner Group doesn't exist. So there's no organization that is called Wagner Group. So it's just a name that is being used to depict Russian mercenaries. But the truth is that most of these guys that they call mercenaries, I mean, it's actually bilateral agreements that Russia signs with countries. So, for example, the same has been said, for Central African Republic, and it's a bilateral agreement. So we've got to be very clear there. But again, France has been in the region since 2013. Operation Barkhane was the first operation. It hasn't actually done any effective counterinsurgency measures. And Malians are calling for a change. They're saying that they need something much more better. Now, perhaps this is going to be the job of the new, the interim junta, which, is run by Assimi Goïta. But again, it's the sovereignty of Mali. Mali has to decide. It shouldn't be something that France should for Mali or be worried about, Mali's decision to bring in anyone they believe that will help them.
Well, in helping Mali, there have been reports that, the military rulers are actually close to hiring these mercenaries. And you've said, this Wagner Group doesn't exist. Well, would this be detrimental to the security fight in Mali?
It depends on, what happens when these guys are brought in. So be it a bilateral agreement. Now, what we've seen, especially in the northern part of Mali, is we've seen militias that are being propped up by the French government because, of course, the French have a very low rating. They cannot actually patrol as they want to within some certain communities in the northern part of Mali, where we've got Al-Qaeda and ISIS factions. So they've brought in a lot of, militias within that area. Now, again, if these militias are armed, to fight against any other unit that comes in, then perhaps that could be a disaster for Mali. We saw the same scenario in Afghanistan when the Mujahideens, were brought in to fight Russia or the then USSR, by combination of the ISIS and the CIA. So, the Malian government have to be very careful in terms of how they carry out these security operations, so that it is not sabotaged by the French, who believe that, as a colonial master, so to speak, they have a say in what happens in Mali.
Well, most countries are looking for different ways to quell the insurgency they are bedeviled with. How else, do you think they should go about doing this?
I think, first of all, it has to be something which the Malian government have to work, within its own national apparatus to build its capacity. Again, our international community comes in just to assist, so it has to be led by Malians. They've got to develop a counterinsurgency strategy to deal with the jihadists that are in the north, but also look at some of the causation factors, especially in the northern part, where you've got the Azawad, so-called separatist group, declared its independence in 2012. The Malian government should engage with them, but also engage with regional states, because countries like Nigeria, Niger, Chad, have an impact within that region, especially with groups that take advantage of the porous borders to penetrate not just the Sahel region, but also the Lake Chad. It's got to be coordinated, and I see the AU playing a much more better role than France.
Right then, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, security analyst David Otto. Thank you for coming on Network Africa.
Thank you.
Side. Two stories on the coronavirus. The director of Africa's Centers for Disease Control, Dr. John Nkagasong, says less than 3.5% of Africans have been vaccinated against COVID-19, and that is far short of its official target of 60%. Well, the World Health Organization's chief, Tedros Ghebreyesus, said that the continent is being left behind by the rest of the world, and this would allow the coronavirus to keep circulating. On the part of the African Union Special Envoy, Strive Masiyiwa, he's calling on the IMF and the World Bank to put a mechanism in place to allow poor countries to access vaccines.
Alliance?
As a continent, we had endorsed a target of immunizing up to 60% of our population. I think a good starting place for all of us would be to understand where we are. As we speak today, as a continent of 1.3 billion people, we have just under 3.5% of our population, eligible population, that has been fully vaccinated.
So far, just two countries in Africa have reached the 40% target, the lowest of any region. As I said last week, that's not because African countries don't have the capacity or experience to roll out vaccines. It's because they have been left behind by the rest of the world. More than 5.7 billion doses have been administered globally, but only 2% of those have been administered in Africa. This leaves people at high risk of disease and death, exposed to a deadly virus against which many other people around the world enjoy protection.
The world needs to understand, we always knew that a crisis like this could emerge. So we really urge those institutions, such as the IMF and the World Bank, to pick up the leadership on this issue and put in place a standby capacity, particularly for poor nations, to have access to vaccines.
Our WHO Director General, Dr.
Zimbabwe has barred unvaccinated civil servants from going to work with immediate effect, with the Information Ministry saying the government had given its workers ample time to get COVID-19 vaccines. The authorities say about 90% of the people admitted to hospital for COVID are unvaccinated, even as the country is averaging 145 new cases a day and reported 7 deaths on Tuesday. Or close to 2 million Zimbabweans, about 12% of the population, are now fully inoculated. In the meantime, it's not clear how many civil servants are affected by the cabinet's decision and whether they will continue to receive their salaries or be able to work from home. Ethiopia's health ministry says 72 people have died of COVID-19 in the last 2 days. Now, this is the highest number of deaths recorded in the country since last week, when the ministry officially confirmed the presence of the highly transmissible Delta variant. Health officials are also saying the number of positive cases has increased. Hospitalizations numbers skyrocketing, with ICU facilities getting full. The violence in Darfur, Sudan, and the difficult economic situation continues to inflict hardship on the Sudanese population. That's according to Volker Perthes, head of the United Nations Integrated Transition Assistance Mission in Sudan, who says this has also led to the absence of justice and accountability. However, he says the country's transition continues to see progress in spite of the setbacks and challenges.
Humanitarian organizations in Sudan are advocating for timely and flexible funding as humanitarian needs, largely driven by the economic crisis and increased intercommunal conflict, continue to rise. Between January and August this year, 2021, about 418,000 people were newly displaced as a result of conflicts and armed attacks across Sudan, mainly in Darfur, parts of Kordofan and Blue Nile. This is about 6 times as many displaced persons, newly displaced persons, as in the same period last year. This committee, ceasefire mechanism, is about monitoring, it's about reporting and trying to mediate and reconcile, but it is not about physical protection. The recent resurgence of intercommunal violence in Darfur therefore demonstrates the urgency of supporting the Sudanese police and the urgency of deploying the joint security-keeping forces. The ceasefire committees is not and cannot be a substitute for those forces and their protection mandate.
It's women leading the revolution. We have been shut out from equally and meaningfully participating in every step of the transition. Our calls to end sexual violence, ensure just family law, and enables equal access to resources, education, and employment continue to be ignored. Instead, disrespect for women's rights has encouraged those who seek to violate them.
I think
Authorities in Sudan say more than 80 people have been killed by flooding in Sudan since the beginning of the rainy season in July. Spokesperson for Sudan's National Council for Civil Defense said that 84 people had died and 67 injured, with torrential rains affecting at least 14 of the 18 provinces and over 30,000 houses destroyed or damaged. Crops and public infrastructure have also been affected. The United Nations estimates that at least 102,000 people have been affected by heavy rains and flooding across the country. Last year, Sudan declared a national state of emergency for 3 months because of floods that killed about 100 people and affected over 600,000 others, destroying over 100,000 homes. The UN peacekeeping mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, is bringing together the military commanders from the South Sudan People's Defense Forces, the Sudan People's Liberation Army in opposition, and the South Sudan Opposition Alliance for a 2-day workshop on protecting the rights of children during armed conflict. The main aim of the workshop is to educate the participants on the 6 grave violations against children, as well as their collective responsibility in ensuring that such abuses do not take place under their command. Still to come on the program. We meet the star behind Lift Like a Girl, an award-winning film on Egyptian female weightlifters. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Kenyans online are expressing their outrage following a sharp rise in the cost of fuel in the country. Well, the country's energy regulator, EPRA, which sets fuel prices, announced an increase in petrol prices to over 130 shillings per litre, and that's the highest so far. Petrol prices have been rising steadily in the country as a result of the global increase in crude oil prices, as well as from increased taxation locally. In the last 2 months, however, the government has compensated fuel marketers in order to keep the prices unchanged. On Tuesday, EPRA announced an increase in petrol prices across the country, including a 6% rise to 134.72 shillings in the capital, Nairobi, and the new prices take effect from Wednesday. Well, let's get more on the story. Joining us now is Abby Agina, a Kenyan journalist from Nairobi. Thank you so much, Abby, for speaking to us. What are some of the reactions you've been hearing on this sharp rise in the cost of fuel?
Well, thank you for having me on the program. Well, it is a day here in Kenya where majority of the motorists are quite unhappy with the increase in the petrol prices. A majority of them have expressed their frustration on the high cost of living, citing that the government needs to rein in on the high fuel prices by reducing some of the taxes. Currently, majority of motorists as well as residents and citizens here have the COVID-19 penetrated me. So many people across different counties in the country are quite frustrated a lot. And we are just receiving some news right now that the public service vehicles tomorrow might be staging a national strike. And this is all linked towards the high cost of fuel.
Well, tell us about the impact, this hike is set to have on the livelihood of the people.
So far, from the various quarters we've been able to speak with, especially the experts, they say that first thing, the cost of transportation is set to go up. But this will see Nairobians spend a little bit more on commuting from point to point. So the rise in fuel prices will definitely impact the cost of transportation. We also expect to see some drastic rises in some of the cost of goods, especially from the manufacturers, because at the factory level, they also are very big consumers of diesel, as well as some plants are running on petrol. So those are the low-hanging fruits at this moment, where they're likely to really impact on the common person on the street. So other than that, of course, the fuel prices is meant to see the basic items at the household level also having a big impact when you come to the shopping, where people have to sacrifice and ask themselves what is of priority. So there'll be a lot of moving bases for households in the coming weeks and months if the fuel prices remain high.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Abby Agina, Kenyan journalist. An Egyptian living in Algeria is crafting furniture made out of palm branches, a skill passed down through generations in his family. He says he wishes to keep this trade alive and teach other people the work before moving back to his home in Egypt.
Surrounded by palm branches, Egyptian craftsman Abu Nasser uses his hands and feet to craft bespoke furniture in his workshop in the small town of Borj Bou Arij, east of Algiers. Abu Nasser was forced to move to Algeria in 2008 after struggling to find work in Egypt, rendering him unable to provide for his family.
I came here to work because I couldn't feed my children, and I had to immigrate to be able to live. After all, I am in an Arab country. It isn't real immigration, and I can't go back to my country at any time.
From handcrafted tables and chairs to wind chimes, the craft was passed down to Abu Nasser through generations of his family, and he is determined to keep it alive and train others in the work before moving back home to Egypt.
I inherited this craft from our ancestors. I have been doing this job for more than 40 years. I don't earn a lot, but even if I had, I couldn't dream of leaving this job. It runs in my blood. I have been doing it for 40 years, and I know all the tiny details about it. I don't believe that anyone can leave a job they have been doing for 40 years and forget about it easily.
His apprentice, Ahmed Yasser Ben Touati, hopes to continue his legacy of crafting furniture after Abu Nasir leaves.
May God guide the young people to the right path. Stay in your country. It is the only country that supports you. I hope illegal immigration stops and young people stay and work in their countries and help develop them.
Business is good for the Abu Nasir family, who have received increased orders for furniture since relocating to Borj Bou Arij from Oud Souf in the Algerian desert.
A marathon in the northern city of Alexandria is marking the screening of an Egyptian film, Lift Like a Girl, that's highlighting the struggle of a young Egyptian woman in the world of professional weightlifting. The award-winning film also highlights what impoverished young women face in weightlifting while focusing on the journey of now 21-year-old Asma Ramadan.
Young Egyptian weightlifter Asma Ramadan, known as Zabiba, was cheering for runners participating in a marathon that was held to mark the screening of Lift Like a Girl, a film which narrates the athlete's accomplishments despite her many struggles.
The film is about my start since I was a young girl, weightlifting until I became 18 to 19 years old. The film shows the training, my struggle. It shows the story of my life.
Living in the local neighborhood of Al Wadiyan in Alexandria, young Zabiba braved the scorching heat and long hours of training in Ramadan's rundown training center.
We train using the most basic equipment. We cannot be compared with those who are trained in the best of places. However, just with our own abilities, we are much better.
The director of the film, Mayi Zaid, was inspired by the journey of Captain Ramadan's daughter, Nala, who won the World Weightlifting Championship in 2003. In 2014, Zaid found the aging coach was still using a small vacant lot to train aspiring young girls to become professional weightlifters.
The idea of the movie dates back to about 2003, when Nala Ramadan won the World Weightlifting Championship. I was very moved at the time with a girl training on weightlifting in the street with her father. The idea stayed with me until 2014 when I met her father and coach, Captain Ramadan, and I found him training girls, and I felt like I wanted to document this journey.
The film won 7 local and international awards and was premiered in a number of international film festivals, including the Toronto International Film Festival and Cairo International Film Festival. 8 Egyptian women weightlifters have won several Olympic medals since the year 2000.
Well, that's girl power for you. That's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.